All right. Well, thank you all for being here tonight and joining us. My name is Shakayla Alvarenga. I'm the Director of Public Programs here at the Mob Museum. Tonight, we definitely have a unique opportunity to delve into a complex and compelling story of family, crime, and redemption. Our guest is Michael Corleone Blanco, a man whose life has been shaped by extraordinary circumstances. Born into one of the most notorious drug trafficking families in history, Michael's childhood memories offer a unique window into a world few of us have experienced. It's important to note that Michael was very young, of course, during much of this time. His perspective is that of a child who grew up in this environment. While he has since learned more about his family's history, tonight we'll be exploring both his childhood recollections and his adult reflections on those experiences. Now, during this moderated Q&A, we will, of course, touch on sensitive topics, including violence, illegal activities. However, our primary goal is really to provide insight into the circumstances of Michael's upbringing and the Blanco family's infamous legacy. Please join me in welcoming Michael Corleone Blanco. So Michael, your name, let's start with there, Michael Corleone Blanco. It has an interesting sort of backstory to it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It's a story that has been misconstrued by public record or myths, but the truth is, my mother did not name me Michael Corleone. It was my uncle. My uncle was considered one of the most savage hitmen in Colombian history. In Pereira. And my father and his two brothers were the first bank robbers that came out of that area after a time that was lived in Colombia of a political unrest called the violence. Everybody knows of la violencia. So they were savages.
Let's kind of start from the beginning here. Tell us what it was like growing up in Colombia and how that community sort of shaped your early years.
Well, I would say as a child, I grew up in Colombia only for a couple of years, and then I made it to the States, and then I went back to Colombia. I guess growing up in Colombia in the time before Pablo Escobar's reign and after Pablo Escobar's reign, it was very different because organized crime in that country had to change because of the violence that Pablo Escobar brought. So to answer your question, which is a great question, how does it form a young man? I was lucky because I lived in the United States and in Colombia, so I had the morals of people who lived here that didn't really believe in social indifferences. But in Colombia, you see a lot of social indifference. In most Latino countries, Hispanic countries, either you're poor or you're rich. And in Medellin, in Colombia, and see, there was no middle class until Pablo Escobar created so much money that then people were able to own homes, buy cars. But during my mother's reign and my brother's youth, there was no middle class. So it was either you were rich or you were poor. So I guess it formed me and the youth of Colombia different ways. I don't want to say a rich kid because for most of my life I had to raise myself in the States. And in Colombia, thank God I had my brothers. But the youth in itself in Colombia during that era was corrupted. And it's very sad to say, as a 46-year-old man, it breaks my heart to know that in one point in time in Medellin, Colombia, a body cost $100. So you have these billionaires corrupting the youth and saying, here's a picture, here's $100 American, and I'll throw in a motorcycle, kill everybody that you see in this picture. And it's heartbreaking because my mother had rules, and the rules were if you're not in the business, we don't got issues. But Pablo threw that out the window.
Mm. Your mother's story is, of course, central to your family's history. Let's shift over to her for just a little bit. Can you tell us about her early life in Colombia and how she first became involved in the drug trade.
Yes. So I write in my book from her mouth to my ears. And she would tell me, I would tell her, you had so much ambition. You made so much money. Why didn't you just walk away? You would have been able to raise me in physical form instead of through federal correction facility or through visiting or through phone calls. Was it worth it? And she said, no, it wasn't, but I really didn't have a choice. She said, I remember being so poor that I went outside to play soccer in El Barrio Antioquia in Medellin, Colombia, which is our Corleone of Sicily. We're considered Colombian Sicilians, right? So she was so poor, she'd go outside to play soccer. And this neighborhood is divided. And she was part of this crew called Los Cosquilleros, and they were a pickpocket crew. Her boyfriend at the time was a falsification document specialist. Um, yeah, it worked out for them. Pestañitas, my brother's father. And yeah, I guess she told me I was outside playing and I had blood all over my feet. I'm like, all over your shoes? And she goes, what shoes, honey? This is Medellin 1950s. And she goes, no, no, I was playing barefoot soccer and there was blood all over my feet. And I'm like, oh, pobrecita, mommy, what happened? You would scratch, you would cut your feet up? She goes, no, that's why I live next to the slaughterhouse. And my feet were covered with blood, and the little girls would come and they would circle me and start making fun of me and saying, your mother's a prostitute and you can't afford shoes. You can't afford shoes. And they would embarrass her and belittle her so much that she would run home and hide in the closet till my grandmother came home. My grandmother was a rigid lady. So either half of the time, maybe she would baby her, or the other half of the time, maybe she would beat her and tell her to be strong. And that's why my mother was so tough. But she said, that day in that closet, I made a decision, Maquito, that you and your brothers will live in the lap of luxury and you will never go through this.
I think we have some photos to share too. We can put that up as well. So during the late 1960s and the early 1970s, so there was this shift, a significant shift, I should say, from marijuana trafficking to cocaine. How did your mother's operations kind of evolve during this period, especially during that time in Queens, New York?
That's awesome that you said evolved, because more than evolved, she pioneered smuggling and drug trafficking as we know it. So it started with cannabis, it started with marijuana, and her partner, El Capitan Bravo, was ex-military and a childhood friend. So they started, inventing these routes with tons and tons of marijuana, island hopping to Florida, and as well as using the ports of New York. And then I guess she transitioned during the 1960s when she met Peruvians and Bolivians. So if you ever see Scarface and you see Sosa, the real Sosa was my mother's partner that brought her to Bolivia and introduced her to other Peruvians. But at the time, they were evolving, and base cocaine, the base of the kilo, was part of like the Peruvian culture, the Bolivian culture. They would smoke it a lot. So now you have all these jungle cooks, real chemists in the jungle, or Indians from these cultures, and they would give her these base cocaine. So she had to discover, first she let it run wild and it became an epidemic. The first crack epidemic in this world wasn't in Queens, New York. It was in Medellin, Colombia, and it was Griselda's fault. So it became nose candy once they learned how to crystallize it, but there was no kitchens. So she had to invent the modern urban kitchen. And in my book, I wrote about how she would come and, help people pay their homes. And if you were a chemist or you were in the university and you needed some money, you could go to Griselda and be like, look, I need some money. Can I help you crystallize in these labs? So the top floors of these houses, it would look like multiple homes, but it was really one home with one whole floor so they can crystallize and dry the cocaine. So then that's when she started, just instead of the marijuana sending kilos of cocaine, my brother would tell me that when he was a kid, you could see the buds of cannabis in the coats and in the long raincoats that they sent to New York, that it was hilarious because my brother's fathers would be like, you could see the bud, Griselda, and she'd be like, stop hating on my smuggling, it's gonna get through, and it did. So then it was real easy for them to transition to cocaine first with the mules, because my mother just used the same method that she used for cannabis. But to answer your question, evolution is a beautiful thing. She created the first double bottom briefcase, and she was the first person to ever think about lingerie, the heels of your shoes, and everything you wore full of cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, your father, Dario, he was also, of course, a key figure in your family's story. Can you sort of describe his role in the cartel and his influence on the business as well?
Yes, my father was the first man to rob the biggest bank in Colombia. It's called El Banco Nacional. A lot of the stories, if you hear the first stories of the Colombian cartels, most of the capos and people that were involved in the business were smugglers. They were contrabanders. And nobody knew how to make money except Griselda. It's marijuana and cocaine. Forget about you bringing electric domestics into Colombia. I'm gonna bring cocaine in. So she needed muscle. My brothers were Pan American world motorcycle champions. And my mother wanted my brother Chiqui, who later would be known as the Prince of Cocaine, to be the world champion of Colombia, which he did. When he was assassinated, he was the Colombian world champion. But at the age of 17, he was a professional circuit motorcycle world champion and the first Colombian to have 3 racing teams. So they needed muscle, and she needed somebody to help her raise these 3 kids. So on the pro circuit or the amateur circuit of motorcycle races, she goes to Pereira and she's like, I need henchmen, but I need men. I need men that are real bandidos, real bandits. And there goes my father and his 2 brothers. And they had just robbed the National Bank of Colombia. So they had some money and they took over their neighborhoods. So they're introduced to my mother at one of the races. And I write in my book that my aunt would tell me, your mother pulls up at their stash house, you know, where they're hiding with all their goons and their guns. And she jumps out a truck. And she's in overalls and her face is all greasy because she's helping do the mechanics on the motorcycle with her kids for this race. And that my father looked at her and they knew who she was. I mean, there was only one godmother. And they say right there, my father fell in love with her. And then I guess he started courting her, and my brother gave him permission to come to the home. And then he became their stepfather. And years later, my father.
And we'll come back to him as well. In the 1970s now, cocaine trafficking from Colombia to the US, it begins to surge, and it leads to the violence most of us known as the cocaine cowboy wars. And that's throughout the 1980s as well. From your perspective as a child at that time, what do you remember about this period and your mother's role in it?
Luxury, lawlessness, and a sense of urgency, but a sense of everybody does this. This is Miami. Why does everybody drive bulletproof cars? Why do we have motorcycles? Is this an entourage, or why are these 20 guys strapped? What's going on here? And you think your family is quite normal, because just like in Scarface, you know, we're not the only dopers on the block. But I remember living well, lap of luxury, but I remember the fear. I'll be honest with you. I remember the state of urgency, like, okay, anything can happen now. So my mother always taught me to have that briefcase ready in case you needed an exit, and we did quite a lot.
And you had mentioned this as well, your mother's sort of innovative tactics in drug smuggling, even using women as mules. In your opinion, how do you think she managed to just stay ahead of law enforcement for so long?
She had a gift. They used to call her the chameleon, la chameleon, la colosa. She had a gift to hide in plain sight. And she taught us most of that, you know. And even as, I don't want to say celebrity, but a B-class celebrity, I'm able to really like hide in plain sight because she taught us how to maneuver. But she, being a lady, was real good at disguising herself. Wigs, she's famous. Whenever you see the big glasses, the Hollywood glasses, Griselda's famous for that. So when in Colombia, when ladies wear the big glasses, they call them Griselda glasses. So she was really able to hide, even during the Operation Banshee years. She was a fugitive for 12 straight years, or 18, I believe. She's also the first woman to be most wanted in 2 different countries at the same time, and she was also the first woman to ever place a $1 million bond in cash and bounce. So keep it, I'm gone.
Your father is pictured here, and I wanna get back to him. You've mentioned witnessing violence from a very young age, and one particularly harrowing incident involved your father's, I believe, his friend at a party. Can you recount that event for us and what took place?
I believe we were staying, and he had just acquired a ranch in the outskirts of Bogota, Colombia, called La Candelaria, and he was building like a compound. So he had an underground arsenal. He was very militant, so he was preparing for war. And he bought this ranch, and I remember parties that he would have. But this particular time, he had a party and everybody started showing up. This is when we got back from Miami, after he, quote, kidnapped me. So, and they're having, you know, Latino parties, salsa, music, everybody. Back then, carteleros were real carteleros. Now, like, I'd hate to put comparisons, but just how you see the Mexican cartels, back in that day, the pioneers, or like we say, los pioneros, la vieja guardia, the old guard, were bandits in the essence. So he's having a bandido party with all these people, drugs, women, henchmen, and I'm upstairs having fun. But remember, believe it or not, a lot of bad guys are family men. So downstairs, a lot of them bring their kids to this party. And one of the kids just kept on boosting me up. Come on, Michael, grab her buttocks. And here's this beautiful lady, and you're a child, and you see this beautiful woman. And I was a different kid. I saw a lot of beautiful women around us, and I had no limits. So I did not understand that me approaching her and slapping her on her buttocks was rude. I did more than that. I grabbed her. The husband, she screams, and the husband turns around and tries to like grab me by my collar. I guess he realized what he did afterwards. But he grabbed me by my collar, and I'm a 5-year-old little boy, and he goes, "This little son of a bitch," and he goes like that, and it was like a scene from a movie. The music stopped. Everything stopped, and everybody looked at him, and now you just pissed off Rubén Darío Sepúlveda, which is one of the best assassins and one of the best bank robbers in Colombia history. And he goes, "What did you say to my kid? ¿Cómo le dijiste a mi hijo? ¿Qué? ¿Y este hijo de putica qué?" And music turned off. I remember my dad slapping him, the bodyguards grabbing him, and with no hesitation, my father already take him outside and take my Quito upstairs. Take me upstairs. So one of the bodyguards is dragging me back upstairs to my room, and I already hear the pistol whooping and everything. And as we're climbing the stairs, I heard the boom, boom, boom. And I got away from the bodyguard, ran down the stairs to see, you know, what the sounds were, the chaos. And I see him laying on the floor, and his wife overlooking him, screaming, "Why did you kill him? Why did you kill him?" And my father telling her in Spanish, "Bitch, shut up, because you could be next." And my father sees me and he tells him, what did I tell you? Look at my Quito, look at the kid. He just saw, take him back upstairs. And it's crazy what you remember as a child, but in some of these pictures, you see a brown leather jacket that my father gave me. Bogota, Colombia is very cold. I love that leather jacket, you know? And I remembered that a couple of days before, I had gotten paint, pintura blanca, on the jacket. And I was so mad, and my father grabbed some gasoline to take off the paint and everything. So that moment, as I'm running back up, the henchman's taking me, I could feel the heat of them just igniting the gasoline. But as a child, you can't comprehend until the next day when I got up in the morning to, oh, party's over, I'm gonna go ride my ponies. And I see the charred remains of the individual that my father had killed and set on fire.
Wow. Whatever happened to the...
She lived. The wife?
The wife.
She lived.
Wow.
My father, I don't know, the violence that they could perform in 2 Shakes of a Lamb's Tail was different, you know, they were savages. But my nanny, my father killed her husband by accident. That's how bad these gentlemen were, that they'd kill people by accident. So he had a conversion van. It was the first conversion van in Colombia history. And leaving that ranch at another time, with the side mirror, he hits a local farmer, un montañero, you know, a farmer, by accident. And being the savage that he is, he still had heart. So they jump out and they see that they killed this guy by accident, not on purpose. And that really broke his heart. So he grabs the gentleman and he takes the body home to his wife. And his wife is there, and back then, I think the dollar in Colombia was 10 times as much. And he goes, I didn't kill him on purpose. Here's 20,000 American dollars. You know what you could do with that in the 1970s in Colombia? You build that, like she just became filthy rich. And then he said, and I got a job for you as well. Do you want to be my son's nanny? And she was my nanny for the next 10 years, probably, yeah.
You had mentioned that your father, you said, quote, kidnapped you. This was 1983. Can you tell us about that? There was a tragic outcome there. Can you tell us about that day and explain how that further impacted your life?
My mother and my father's relationship was beginning to dissolve. Now, as a grown man, I understand, you know, that marriage is not simple. I love my wife. I love you, baby. But I understand, you know, and think about this. Times change, but in that time, 2 drug kingpins that love each other, but there is I guess a understanding of power. Even though my father was a man of men, a man amongst men, un bandido de verdad, she was the boss, and she would put down, and she would scream, and she would tell him what to do. So their relationship dissolved, I want to say, because of the money, the wars, and the amount of drugs that they were consuming every night or every other night. And because my father was very good looking. He was a great looking man, 6'5", 6 feet something, gray hair, and they would call him the actor, el actor. And everybody would be like, llegó el actor in his Porsche with his gloves and his hair coming out, Burt Reynolds, porcelain mouth. You know, it was like a freaking actor. And they're like, Gordita, why do you call him the actor? And my mom's like, because even when he cheats on me, he's such a good actor, I can't figure it out. So they're breaking up. He starts dating this beautiful white woman, blue eyes, and he was in love with her. And now I'm going to Tony Roma's with his new woman. And when my mother still has custody of me, and we were in the penthouse in Fort Lauderdale. We had houses and mansions all throughout South Florida, but we had a couple that only we knew of. So we're there, and he goes to pick me up to buy clothes. I'm gonna take the kids shopping. Next thing you know, I'm on a jet, and I look out the window, and I'm in Bogota, Colombia. And I knew it, but since we were so used to bouncing around, it's like, okay, now we're here, but why am I here? But even to this day, I write about it, that looking out that window in that plane, I'm like, this ain't good. This is Colombia. I'm not supposed to be here. He loved me so much. He didn't want me to become a victim, knowing that now we even had more enemies. This was the second Cocaine Cowboy Wars. So now, almost 22 members of my family were already dead. It was like 15, my aunts, my uncles, cousins, everybody. We were already at war, and I guess he just got tired of the drug addiction and the murder.
What was your mother's response to that?
From what I understand, she called him and said, you got 24 hours to put him on a jet and bring him home. Don't forget who I am, she told him. And with the time, I think it was a matter of a month and a half, 2 months. And supposedly, the hitmen, nobody had pictures of my father. The book, The Kings of Cocaine, had not come out yet. No feds had pictures of my father. He was real good at that. You couldn't take pictures, you couldn't have a camera around us, nothing. So they never had a description of my father. It was the kid that looks just like his father. He's got a briefcase. He looks like a little drug dealer like his father. They're always together, and they shop at this mall, and Dario has 2 stores in this mall, retail stores. So I guess they were pacing there for days doing their homework, and one day we showed up, and then from there, they just started following us, and within a matter of days, they already had our location and everything. And dental pains, is the worst thing you can have. So on the farm, I'm telling my father, take me to the dentist, take me to the dentist. Back then, there was armored vehicles, but a lot of people would do their own armored vehicles. And he had a Bronco, and he had put metal plating on the inside of the doors, everything. And we're leaving the farm in this Bronco. And I don't know if a lot of people know about how farms, but there's always these bars that separate the exit so cattle can't get out. And right when we got to those bars, the tires popped on this makeshift Bronco. And life is very weird, because maybe it wouldn't have been as easy for the assassins if we were in that vehicle. He jumps in a Cavalier with no license plate. So now they had an excuse to pull us over. So yeah, lo and behold, going up La Candelaria with only one bodyguard. He leaves all the other bodyguards at home. Only one bodyguard to take his kid to the dentist in this small town. We get pulled over and rushed by corrupted police officers, and my father didn't peep it right away. But then after a moment, when he saw that they weren't taking the money and he couldn't finesse them, he said, I don't know, something's wrong here. He handed his 45 to me. I'm a mafia kid. I already know what to do. I'm going to stash this puppy right here in case he needs it. I'll give it to him. And his bodyguard stayed with his 45 on him. And I'm like, you kind of like felt it. You know how like they say you could feel it in the air. And then they say, no, we don't need your money. My lieutenant wants to talk to you. And then my father kind of peeped, and he's like, why, your lieutenant? He goes, nah, come on, follow us to the station. And as we're going to the station, his bodyguard tells him, Dario, la estación de policía is not down the street. And then my father was like, oh, it's a hit. So then two other police, or another motorcycle with 2 other police pull up. They tell him to pull over again. He jumps out. Mind you, I have the 45 now. And he jumps out and tells them, gentlemen, listen, it's not a problem. I got you. What do you need? You want American dollars? Yeah, here's a couple hundred, this, and that. And they're like, no, you don't get it. That my lieutenant is on his way. And then, boom, they handcuff him. And then they handcuff him to the door. And I guess right then and there, within a matter of seconds, I heard the tires screeching of different cars that were unmarked, one police car. And it's crazy what photographic memory is, or childhood trauma. Let's call it what it is. That I remember the cars to this day. I remember the cars. I remember the weapons they used. I speak about seeing a German Luger because I knew what it was. I saw the one that we say in Colombia, the one that stutters on Uzi. I saw the Uzi, and then I heard the storm. And yeah, they killed my father right in front of me.
Now, following your father's death,
Yes, ma'am.
how did your mother sort of balance this role as a parent with her position in the drug trade? And can you kind of share some of your memories of her, including the trips that you took to the United States as well?
I can remember my mother putting vapor rub on my chest. I could, like that type of stuff. Like, I remember her doing arepitas with las señoras de servicio, with the maids. Very, very cariñosa, like we say. She was raised so strict by her mother, and she endured so many beatings and hostility that with us, well, with me, I was her ñaña. But my brothers got their asses kicked a lot. But me, I was a little spoiled. I could probably recall maybe twice that she spanked me. And I recall her cooking so much with the maids, right? And it was her thing. If you're Latino and you know shows from the 80s like El Chavo del Ocho and stuff like that, I talk about it in my book. I wrote about it. And I remember I was having to like sit down, or Que Pasa USA, like in Miami, and having to sit down and watch these shows as she cooked with the maids. And it was very heartwarming to to a certain degree at that age, you don't understand that you're a mafia prince and you're part of this cartel, but you do know that something's going on. But we still sat down to have dinner every night.
Did you ever talk to her about your father's death?
Yes, multiple times.
What'd she say?
She denied it to the day, She denied it to the day. She would tell. During one visit, I remember her coming to tears and telling my brother's childhood sweetheart wife, I still dream with him every night. Now, this is why she's doing 22 years in the feds. And I thought to myself, damn, and she killed him.
Knowing that, I guess, how do you reconcile with this person who you called a loving mother, but also, kind of a cold-hearted killer too?
I guess you learn what most men should know, that there's only one mother. You learn to love your mother more.
And I also want to talk about, during this period, you had encountered, you had mentioned Pablo Escobar.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about your encounters with him. And if you need a minute, take a minute too. Yeah.
A lot of people can say they've been in the presence of like greatness or frequencies, but he was our Julius Caesar. So for anybody that grew up during the Medellin drug cartel heyday, before and after, and even me, being the son of Griselda Blanco, I idolized this man, this emperor, so much. And I remember my mother getting pissed and me telling my mother in visit, but Pablo's a new patron and he's taking over Medellin, and what about one day I can be the boss? And Cheeky, shut up. He's not the boss. I'm the boss. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's El Patron. He runs Medellin. He goes, yeah, who do you think taught him everything? And I'm like, who? She goes, me. She goes, that was my little pupil. I would slap him in the back of the head and tell him, take that taxi back, I don't want it. And when he would steal from the dead and bring stuff to my mother would sometimes give him extra money so he can go back to Envigado and feed his family. And she was also the first person to tell him, listen, all this thievery and all this contraband, yeah, your future's in cocaine. I invented this game, and in the States, they go crazy. In the clubs, in the discotheques, they go crazy. You're gonna have an issue with your boss, and I don't like your boss too much. So one day you might have to nip that in the bud. And if you do, I got a job for you. and she fell out with his boss. Pablo kills his boss after his boss puts an assassination attempt on him in prison in Medellin. And his first $1 million, my mother made him for him.
Wow.
Yeah. He had the plane where he sent that first load to my mother outside La Hacienda Nópolis. You can see it everywhere.
Now, another significant turning point was in February of 1985. And this was your mother's arrest by the DEA. I think you were in maybe a park across the street from where that happened. Tell me about what happened that day.
Irvine, California. Finally, we leave the cocaine cowboy wars behind. Finally, we're not on edge every 2 minutes. There's no more bodyguards. Rome was falling. And my brothers and my mothers knew that in order to take over the California market and the routes through Mexico, they had to be more secluded. Plus, due to the backlash of the cocaine cowboy wars and Reaganomics and the operation that happened when George Bush decided to, cut the borders off and the island hopping routes and the Panama situation. Now we're in California with lesser bodyguards, no limousines, no, regular cars hiding in all these stash houses. Well, my brother wasn't hiding. My brother was a different monster. He was. I say it a lot. But if you ever saw RoboCop 2, my brother Cheeky was that kid. At the age of 18, at the age of 19, he was the third largest cocaine distributor in the world. My mother had given him the routes, and he was already known as El Príncipe de la Cocaína, the Prince of Cocaine. He was hiding in plain sight. There was 3 Mercedes 1000s in the world. One belonged to the Sheik, one belonged to, I think it was a British royalty, and one belonged to my brother in this mansion that he had just bought from a very famous celebrity. So we're in Irvine, California now, and my brother Chiqui's in Beverly Hills. A lot of us Blancos had migrated to the Bay Area in California, and my brother Dixon had taken over the distribution up there for Cheeky with, as a matter of fact, my cousin's in the building, and the Blancos up there, half Nica, half Colombian. And his aunt was known as the queen of drugs in San Francisco. So now they're taking all over the California routes, but my mother is being hunted by the FBI, the DEA, and everybody, and one particular agent, Bob Palomo, so much that she doesn't come out the woodworks. She becomes, there's another book the gentleman wrote about it, and they call her Mama Coca, that she was becoming, I guess how you could say, an urban myth. They're like, Griselda's in LA. No, Griselda doesn't exist anymore. No, have you seen her? No. I saw her kids though, the Prince, Cheeky. He was out with El DeBarge. He was out with Prince and Michael Jackson. Yeah, that's the kid, but where's Griselda? You'll never see her. Because even the major cocaine distributors in California that were doing, 200, 300, 400, they could only meet my brothers. They would never be in contact with my mother. So we're hiding out, and I was about to be a normal kid. I was gonna go to school. I wasn't gonna be home taught. I was gonna be able to have friends, and life was about to change in California. And my brothers still had to give my mother her percentage of everything. So in one of those, my mother tells me, come on, we're gonna go see your brothers. So we had to go from Irvine to LA to go pick up a briefcase from my brother Uber and Dixon. And that's how it started. And I write about it in the book. We're there, and she's counting the money in the briefcase. And my brother Pete gets a phone call. He picks up the phone, and it's one of his workers telling him, yo, I don't know if I'm seeing shit, yeah, but the whole area is surrounded with feds. They're everywhere. And he's like, bro, he's like, no, there's vans, there's cars. They already know where you're at. It turns out that they had, one of the informants had already given Uber's location and they knew that my mother would be around there at that particular house one day. That day, they started the tale from that night. And I remember like yesterday, my brother says that on the phone, what? And my mother gets freaked out. She goes up the stairs to the second floor with the briefcase. And I remember my brother Dixon trying to detour my attention and be like, no, come here, so you ready for school? And my mother from the second floor telling my brother Uber, they're not here for me. Nobody knows I'm here. Only you guys know I'm here. They're here for you. And they had just probably given her like $500,000 in that briefcase. And she's like, oh man, it's a wrap. And then my brother tells her, no, it's okay. Helicopter, private jet Colombia. We got this, mommy. We're gonna leave in the 2-speed bikes. We're gonna get their attention. My mother, at that time, Toyota Supras were like the thing. And she had one in every house. She had a different Toyota Supra in every house. And in that house, in Uber's house, she had a light blue Toyota Supra in the garage, just in case. And we didn't even go in that car. So she left one car in the front, and she's like, she's trying to tell my brother, what are you talking about? They're not here for me. They're here for you. I'm not leaving the car. And then my brother's like, no, you're leaving. And my mother said, oh, I'm done running. This kid has to go to school. This kid has never had a normal life. So yeah, there's no more running. I'm going home tonight, and I'm going to pray. We leave, and I remember leaving that garage in the Supra, and I'm like, damn, again? And then it just happened the very next day. Well, that night we felt it. My other brother calls, and he's like, yeah, you got to go. Cheeky. He was, now the head of the family. And long story short, wake up the next day, all I want to do is eat breakfast. I remember my brother's grandmother cooking me una arepita and huevos. Mexicanos say huevos rancheros. We say huevos perico, with the tomatoes. And then I remember like, okay, everything's good. Nothing happened last night. Mommy, can I go to play at the park? And she goes, no, stay. You ride your bike in the front where I can see you. Don't go to the park. Took off to the park. Went to the park, and I remember the kids playing guns, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna go get my real gun to play with the kids. And one of the kids didn't want to give me his toy gun, so I'm like, damn it, I'm gonna go get mine. And I remember looking, I'm like, why is there a helicopter? And back then, the helicopters, a lot of helicopters still had like the floating things, because they were the helicopters from water or something. So I'm like, why is that helicopter there? I didn't understand nothing until I saw all the agents surrounding the park as well. They're like, Michael, and I'm like, nah. You guys are either here to kidnap me like I've been taught, or the 3 letters, but I'm not taking a chance. And I tried to clear it on them, but they already had the perimeter, and the agent came up to me and told me, Michael, we're not here to hurt you. I'm like, you guys aren't Colombian bad guys? And they're like, no, listen, something's going on at the house. Your mother needs to talk to you. And I swear, as they grabbed my bike and put in I'm like, please, my bike. I just got my bike. I'm a normal kid. They put it in the trunk, and in that moment, I thought to myself, damn, why did I get in the car? Because of the Colombian bad guys, I'm done, even at that age. And I got home, and it was very shocking. I write about it like things that trigger stuff, right? I guess in Dianetics, L. Ron Hubbard speaks about that a lot. And something that triggers me is, have you ever poured cereal into a bowl and some falls out into the counter, and you're like, oh, it just fell out to the counter? I remember all the agents pouring out my brand new cereal that I wanted to eat all over the counter. So to this day, that noise triggers me. I'm like, damn, why are you guys wasting my cereal? And that's what happened. I went up the stairs, and that's the famous scene that Bob Palomo kisses my mother on the cheek and says, Griselda, I've been waiting for this moment.
Yeah.
And my mother was there with her headpiece crying. She had a .38 bodyguard, which is the ones that hide the hammer. She had it on the thing, and I'm like, Mommy. And she goes, Marquito, these people, I don't know, that gun's not mine. And I'm like, that's your gun. In my mind, I'm like, that's one of your guns. That's not the 9, but I know that's the one you keep next to the counter, next to the Bible. And then we didn't want to believe it. So in my book, I wrote about what transcended that day. And yeah, that was probably the second worst day of my life. Yeah, never slept with my mother again that night.
Yeah. Now, during your mother's incarceration, you were able at that time to visit her in prison. How did she explain the situation to you?
Oh, real easy. She lied. You know, she did what most Colombian parents or people that were part of cartel families tell you, that I might have to go to the university. The university is their college. Basically, it's federal correctional facilities. And then she would always tell me it was a hospital. But it took me a couple visits to, like, all right, the jig is up. And it took one of my cousins, well, not really blood cousin, but my legal guardian's son, to just like destroy the illusion. You know, when you're a kid and everybody tells you an illusion and you believe it because everybody tells you, he destroyed it right then and there. We're leaving the visiting. And I'm like, wow, why is that college and they all got scrubs and all the security? And he goes, are you stupid? That's a federal building in New York. And I'm like, wait, but my mom said she'll be done with college in a couple months. She goes, Michael, I don't think so. And I'm like, why? She goes, well, do you know who your mother is? And I'm like, yeah, she's my gordita. She's my mommy. And he goes, no, stupid, your mother's la madrina. My dad has been working for her for over 30 years, and he just got a life sentence for something that happened with your mom. And my mom works for your mom, and the mansion we have, your mom bought it, and you're the son of the queen of cocaine. And I'm like, oh, shit, that makes a lot of sense now. And then the next visit, I smuggled her in chorizos, chicharrón, and Colombian food. I would always do it, underwear. She would go into so she can eat. She loved her traditional comida colombiana, Colombian food. And she goes, what are we gonna do when I'm done with college? We're gonna move to Colombia and this. And I'm like, yeah, mommy, this ain't a college. And she's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, mom, that's not a nurse. That's a correctional officer. You're not a nurse and you're wearing these things. Those aren't scrubs. It's a uniform. She goes, who told you that? I'm like, come on, mommy, I'm not dumb. And she goes, no. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, we'll talk about it later. And that's how it was for the next couple of years. This is nothing, I'll be able to tuck you in a couple months. And those couple months turned to 24, 26 years.
Yeah. And of course, over that period of time, there was a lot of grief that you had to deal with your brother's murders. How do you think that impacted you during that time?
Oh, savage. Yeah. When my brother Chiqui was assassinated, I lost it all. He was the future of the family, and it's real hard when you lose somebody that you've known your whole life.
What kind of memories do you remember with your older brothers?
What I don't remember, just to be blunt, in a little hood, bawling out of our minds. I never saw a kid or these kids with so much money, so much luxury. And I would always remember how tough they would be and how they didn't want me to be a little spoiled brat. And it was because my mom was so tough. But even my mother, I remember talking to my mother and be like, look at Chiqui, and look at Dixon, and look at Beatty. And she's like, yeah, but look, they just did 7 years. And they're doing 7 years. And I'm like, yeah, but damn it, they did it, mommy. And my mom would tell me, man, listen, look at the mirrors of your brothers, and look, this is not for you. You're gonna go to Yale, you're gonna major in history, and you're gonna be a lawyer. And I'm like, no, I wanna be an actor, or I wanna be on TV, maybe an author, but I think I'm gonna be a capo first. And that was, now as a 46-year-old man, I understand programming, and you understand what's right and wrong in life when you have children. Little did I know that I was losing my innocence just because of what I was seeing. And even though they would try to balance it out, like my brothers would tell me, no, you're gonna be the one that shows the face for the family. You're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna graduate, and this and that. But this is how you load the 45 in case they come in. Load it down so it doesn't ricochet. Don't bring it out unless it's lit. And yeah, don't trust nobody that tells you, come here. Yeah, so it was very conflictive.
Yeah. So I'm fast forwarding a few years now too. I know that when you moved to the States, you had tried to live a quote normal life. There was a period 2003 to 2006 that you were directly involved in drug trafficking. What happened there? And I know that there was a raid of some sorts too.
It wasn't a raid. It's what we call in the business a trophy case. During the cocaine Cowboys coming out, my criminal career took a exit stage left, but at the same time, like I metamorphosized to now this urban myth. Now it's Griselda's son. So now everybody comes out the woodwork because now it's like, I want to say the rapper effect. Now you're a super famous dope boy, but I wasn't taught that. I was taught to hide in the shadows and drive around in a Honda with $500,000 in the back that I got to go deliver it after I picked up those 50 bricks at the port. But I'm driving a Honda because my mommy taught me how to hide. My brothers taught me how to do this correctly. But now I'm on every TV screen. So now it's like I'm a bad guy in Miami, but now I'm a famous bad guy. And I wanted to be a rapper. I wanted to do this, but now it's like I've lived my life in the shadows being a bad guy. Honestly, a dope dealer and a jack boy. My adrenaline was robbing couples and telling them, hey, what? I got you, and I'm not gonna bow down because my mother didn't bow down to Pablo, and in Miami, I'm not bowing down. So I took it, and I'm gonna keep it. Do what you gotta do. I'll see your people next month again. And it's something that is so sad because now I don't wanna come off like I'm glorifying it. Because in Colombia, we say, inocencia perdida, un kilo por una vida. Lost innocence, a kilo for a life. And to corrupt the youth so much, it's just so dangerous. Because then it transitions to multiple generations. And I guess that's what us Christians call a generational curse.
2012, your mother was killed, and it was, obviously, I'm sure for you, a shocking event that sort of mirrored the violence of her past. Now, in your book, you sort of question whether this was the way to, quote, close the cycle of violence. How do you view this now, and what are your thoughts on, I guess, breaking this chain of hatred and revenge?
When you read my book, and hopefully when you see the series that I'm working on right now, you understand that I was truly favored by the Most High to have a white man minister stepfather that taught me the Word of God in Northern California. So he taught me what was right and what was wrong. Pastor Danny Everhart, Minister Danny Everhart from I think it's the teen outreach. If you guys are Christian or people that know about the Nicky Cruz ministries and all that, he came from that time. So he really taught me the Word of God. And it's crazy because we just buried him 2 years ago in Central Valley, California. And he would always quote scriptures, and he would always tell me these things. And when you read the book, that man was present during the death of most of my brothers and my mother to console me or to take me to the visiting, to speak to my mother. So when my brother died, he told me that since my brother bled out, it took him an hour. He was able to scream to the Lord and ask for forgiveness, and God welcomed him into heaven. And then when my mother died, sometimes you don't want to hear that. It's like, okay, man, I don't want to hear it. But then as you become a God-fearing man and you become a father and you become a survivor that knows what is right and what is wrong, you start to understand the wisdom of our seniors. And then when my mother dies, 20 years later, this is a woman that he knew. He knew all my brothers. He went to Colombia. He was my legal guardian. And we reconnect before she dies, and it was so awesome the years I got to spend with him before he passed away. And then he told me one simple thing that made me understand it, both because I came from that criminal world, and also as a Christian man. He told me, you know what your mother understood plainly, Michael? And I said, what? And he said, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And that's all.
In your book, you also write a lot about just living in constant fear. I think you quoted it, always waiting for death. At what point did you decide to finally turn your life around, and what kind of motivated that change?
I would say her assassination. I would say when my mother gets killed outside the butcher shop, you want to kill everything that moves. And I was still transitioning to becoming a father, or I've been called a lot of bad stuff in my life, but the best thing I've been called is papi, to be a father. So now you got these kids and you're like, okay, do I raise them like I was raised? Do I continue a generational curse of leaving bodies? And is that right? And Pastor Danny Everhart calls me from California and tells me straight up, I know what you're thinking, and I know you just inherited around $10 million, so now you got money for war. Yeah, but if you have people killed, this will follow your children. And for the next 2 days, I was like, I'm gonna spend the bag. And then I realized that somebody had to call it quits. So I called it quits right there. I get a little emotional.
Okay. Now, your wife, Marie, she comes from a similar background.
Yes.
Can you explain how you both met, and maybe how your sort of shared history has influenced both of your approaches to parenting your kids now?
As most parents know, it's a process. So, sometimes you want to be better than your parents. I'm not saying that my parents were bad, or they kind of were, but I'm not saying that her parents are bad or nothing. But when you live in Miami, you grow up in this lawless culture that basically Griselda invented, this cowboy culture, this no hold bars type of thing. So I didn't want to raise my kids like that. So we live in the suburbs, and we go from California, Miami, all over the place together, and I want to raise them right. And just to put this out there, what's crazy is that my wife is born on the same date as my mother, February 15th. So it was like she sent me an angel. And I guess we're still figuring it out, but we're figuring it out legally. And I'm making legal tender by not only becoming a speaker now, an author. We were on a hit show, Cartel Crew. We're currently working on a couple shows, and it feels good to have somebody, at least. I mean, it's sad that we both had similar traumas. Our parents maybe not being around certain times, and I love her parents now, by the way. They finally accepted me, so I'm okay with that. And it feels good to walk this journey with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My last question for you. So I'm going to read a quote from your book. In your book, you state, "Over and over again, I remember the death of all of my relatives step by step, and that makes me think that if I'm alive, it's because there may be another way, a salvation. It's about exploring it so as not to continue living the same criminal life with the same beliefs forever and ever." Your life has been, I think, defined by these two contrasting paths, right? Your family's notorious legacy, and then this personal journey that we speak about today towards redemption. So as you work to forge this new path, what are your hopes for the future, for yourself, for finally breaking this cycle of violence?
That's a good question. What are my hopes for the future? Exactly that, to know that I've broken this circle of violence. But my hopes for my future is to understand that everything I make now legally has to have a purpose, right? As how I grew up, I learned to blow money. And believe it or not, that's also not a good thing when you're becoming a grown-ass man. So I got kids now, you know, I want to make sure they have land, and I want to make sure that they live good, and they can say, oh, my father got this legally. So that means a lot to me. My hopes for my future is to see my children and my children's children. You ever saw The Godfather 3, when Michael Corleone dies as an old man in this villa in Italy, and he's seeing all his kids, you know, but he has such a traumatic life, but now he sees his. I don't want any more traumatic life. I want to see my children's children. I want to build a couple of compounds of tiny homes and do stuff like that. You know, we do cannabis consulting now. I'm an author. My wife and I are executive producers. I just want my kids to be proud of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. I had about 15 other questions, but I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible. In just a few minutes, we will be holding a book signing for my mother, the Godmother, the true story of Michael Corleone Blanco, the son of Griselda Blanco, right behind in the courtroom waiting area. But before we begin, we have about 5 minutes or so just to answer any audience questions. And so if anyone has a question, if you can just raise your hand and someone will bring you a mic.
Hi. I was wondering if you watched the series that Sofia Vergara did on the story of your family. And if you did watch it, what did you think?
Yeah, I did see it. Saw it maybe twice. What did I think? I am not a hater. You know, I commend her. She did an okay job. You know, she should have got that little Emmy for it. As a person that just spent 20 years writing a masterpiece, as a person that lived it and smelled his mother and his brothers, I can't legally comment about it because of a lawsuit, but I'm truly happy that it was a Colombian queen and a mother also that played my mother. That's what I can say legally.
How old were you when you, I might have missed this, what were the ages when you witnessed your father's death and then your mother getting
I was 5.5, I was almost 6. Because then if you read the book, I had my 6-year-old party in Miami. So I was about to be 6 years old.
And then how old were you when your mother was arrested?
7. And then all my brothers, 7.5, gone. So basically, like, I tell my kids a lot, I go, you know, you guys got it good, you guys got it easy. I started paying rent at 13. You know, I was a grown man, and if a lot of people here know my story, growing up in California, I was always very independent. I used to pay my legal guardians. And when you read the book, it's crazy because there's a famous song from Wu-Tang, and it's like, life as a shorty shouldn't be so rough. I had a rough childhood. Yeah.
I have been, you know, I've been a connoisseur of reading about the history of the Colombian dictator and all of that, and I have watched various documentaries, the Rancartour, the Cocaine Cowboys, the 1 and then the 2, and I've watched them so many times.
Have you seen Reloaded?
Yes, I've seen Reloaded.
Okay.
So the difference between Reloaded and the original, like, for me, there was some reused footage that seemed like they were using the same interview but were for different stories. So I guess my question to you is, in your journey to, you know, figure out who you were and, you know, and learn all that, how do you navigate those different stories from other people that were adjacent to your mother's life? I'm talking about the Roberts guy, the guy
John
who's now
Roberts.
dead. Yeah, John Roberts.
Monster. He did great.
You know, like the what Mickey Monday.
Mickey Monday, good friend, man. want to go see him in a couple months.
Yeah. So and I also read that he got caught up in an
Yeah.
auto theft ring.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 2023, dude.
He's a good dude. It's just, shit happens.
he seemed like when I watched the documentary, he seemed like a really decent guy. So I guess my question to you is, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling, is all of these big characters that have shared their stories and have brought. So how do you reconcile all of their stories about what your mom was doing? And you obviously were a kid at the time. How do you reconcile what they say with what's in your head?
To answer your question, and that's a great question. You know how I did it? I did it knowing that I was gonna monetize it one day, so I knew to do my homework. Now in production we call it workshop. I've been doing workshops since I was 6 years old. I would hear this story from you, and then you. Yeah, but I need you, and you to fill in the holes to that because somebody might be lying here. How do I balance this out? But then when you become a producer or you become a TV personality, you understand transition of scene, right? Transgression, right? And my life literally is a movie. So I've always, you get it? So like I've learned to transition. So I started doing my homework knowing that one day I would have to put this in order. But to elaborate on that, what was tougher than that was holding your IP, not giving away every little hole that only public record knows because there's 100 documentaries and that's public record. And that's great how you stole that. You stole that story, yeah, but you missed 70% of it. And I'll tell you why. Why? Because I just had lunch with the guy that you're talking about. And he used to come to my house for breakfast as I was 6 years old. So this is the real one. And then you start filling the holes that they don't. And then it all makes more sense. Like you said, like John Roberts and all. There's so many holes in so many stories. Thank you so much.
We'll do one more question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I thought she raised her hand right here.
I don't remember if it was El Chapo or if it was Pablo Escobar that had said that they were the one woman that they always respected and that the one woman that they were always going to be scared of was the godmother of cocaine.
It was.
Were you ever scared of your mom? Not because she would do anything to you, but just scared in general because you knew.
Hell yeah. My mother would look, I would say something dumb and she'd give me cosquernadas on the head. Shut up, talk like that. You're gonna be a good boy. And to answer your question, it was Pablo Escobar. He said, the only man I feared in my life was a woman named Griselda Blanco.
Yeah. I want to thank you all for coming to tonight's event. We really, really appreciate it. And another round of applause for Michael Blanco.